All right, guys, let's go ahead and kick it off. Thank you, everyone, for coming and being a part of our webinar today, Evolution of a PMO Leader, Lessons from Matthew McConaughey. Now, who here hasn't heard of Matthew McConaughey? Anybody on our attendees list who hasn't heard of Matthew McConaughey? I'm not getting any responses. That means everyone here has absolutely heard of Matthew McConaughey. That's perfect. I'm glad to hear that. Now, who would have thought that you would hear PMO leader and Matthew McConaughey in one sentence? All right, no more chats there as well. Um, Let me ask you this: what do you guys think I'll be talking about from Matthew McConaughey's perspective? How do you guys think that even ties in to being a PMO leader? Any thoughts from anyone? Okay, silence there as well. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And I guess you will get all that information through this webinar. Kevin mentioned his line of work. Mm, not really. Um, it's associated to that, but not because of his line of work. Um, but let me go ahead and ask you guys this: has anyone heard, been or attended any of my previous webinars? Anyone on the audience who's attended my previous webinars? Okay, no worries, welcome. And I'm glad that you were able to attend this webinar. Just a quick overview and bio on myself, and we can go ahead and get started. I am the founder and director at Pervaz Consulting. I've been in the field of project management, program management, and PMOs for about a decade and a half. Um, my mission and the mission of my organization, Pervaz Consulting Corporation, is to make sure that we are there to make sure that all PMO leaders succeed in their mission to set up, optimize, and evolve their PMOs successfully. And we provide services in terms of doing audits for your PMOs, helping you define a 90-day custom fit PMO setup roadmap with success metrics, action items, focus areas, etc. We help you, with PMO leadership support. A lot of PMO leaders, need to sort of, a bit of a sounding board or someone who can, be there by their side as they're going about setting up the PMO. We provide those services as well. And in addition to that, any sort of right fit tool assessments for your PMO, we can help you with that. Any sort of leadership development work such as workshops and trainings, we provide those services. And finally, also we provide PMO staffing for organizations across North America. I'm also a LinkedIn Learning author. LinkedIn Learning, as you know, is LinkedIn's premier online education platform for professionals from all disciplines. I was fortunate enough to be pegged by them to to create their very first course on PMOs called Setting Up a PMO. You can find it on LinkedIn Learning. We get about 4,500 unique monthly views on that course. So that's a bit about me, and I want to welcome everyone here. And before I go ahead and get started with the crux of the matter, I just want to understand, who I'm speaking with. We have a few attendees today, and I want to ask if any of you guys here are actually PMO leaders. Anyone in the audience who's a PMO leader? If you're a PMO leader, if you could just type in saying yes, that would be great. Okay, Kevin's saying not yet. Are you guys all? Carol is a PMO leader. Wonderful. Um, how many of you are project managers or project coordinators or business analysts? Okay, Lucine's a project manager. Kathleen's, falls in that bucket as well. Ramesh is a PM as well. We've got a few hands up there. And then, are you guys here for you? I think Carol is a PMO leader already. But for all of you who are not PMO leaders, do you guys want to become PMO leaders one day? Is that why you're here on this webinar? Okay, Lucine is there. Lucine mentioned that. Okay. Kevin is a director of operations and wants to become a PMO leader one day. Very easy and sort of a good dotted line for you to be able to make that jump, Kevin. Happy to chat more about it as well. But I think you might see some pointers on this webinar for that. Okay, Marcella wants to become a PMO leader as well. Now, all of you guys who want to become PMO leaders, do you guys have a clear line of sight? Um, and do you guys have a clear line of sight on how you would become a PMO leader? So L Woodrow mentioned not a PMO leader, not certified PM yet, working on it, and this is part of the journey for you. Congratulations and welcome to the journey. That's one of the fun parts of all of this as well. Um, Also, newsflash: you don't necessarily need to be a certified PM to be a PMO leader. Um, you know, we'll talk about a bit about that on this webinar as well. It depends on the situation, but just to let you know that it's not a requirement to be certified a certified PM to be a PMO leader. All right, guys. It was good to sort of get a sense of who the audience is. Now let's go ahead and get started. So, um, here is the thing, right? Everyone here in this audience has heard of Matthew McConaughey. We all have. He is a popular rom-com star who became an Oscar-winning powerhouse, right? Now, if I look at this specific slide, I've drawn a bit of a path, right? I've drawn a bit of a path here where he did movies like, Dazed and Confused and Fool's Gold, where he was this, dashingly good-looking dude, a fun guy image, and then, slowly he started shedding that image and started taking more meatier, juicier roles that demanded more acting chops, right? So with movies like, Lincoln Lawyer, and then finally his journey to Dallas Buyers Club that earned him the Oscar, right? And if you even look at his journey beyond his Oscar-winning moment, he's been taking, a lot of, meteor roles. He's not turned back to any of those, romantic comedy type movies, which were frankly, quite lucrative and easy for him to get. But he's now focused on developing his career as a serious actor. Um, and I think movies like Interstellar and stuff like that, where he's working with famed directors, um, are that is something that he's totally focused on. That's where all the work for him is coming now, and he truly got his all right, all right, all right moment. You whenever you hear of Matthew McConaughey, what he usually likes to say. And then this entire renaissance of a career, the New Yorker magazine actually termed this the McConaissance, right? Because he completely transformed himself, he completely transformed his image, he turned his movie career upside down to get to where he wanted it to be. And this doesn't really happen by chance, right? It's not like, today he's doing Fool's Gold, tomorrow he's doing, Meteor Rolls. He took some serious action and there was a lot of introspection around this as well. And so in our webinar today, I want to talk about, three lessons from Matthew's career transformation and then, take it to how it applies to you as aspiring or first time or even seasoned PMO leaders, right? So the first lesson that we can learn from Matthew is don't let them pigeonhole you. So when I look at Matthew McConaughey, he had this image of a Hollywood rom-com guy, and nobody, from the audience to the industry pundits, I'm sure even his agent didn't really have that much faith in him and his ability to take on very serious roles, and he would just get kept on getting offered the same and similar roles again and again and again. And there was a point where he wanted to just get rid of that image. And now for us, when you think of ourselves, our world is sort of confined within the organization. But when you look at, someone like Matthew McConaughey, who's a global icon, you know, that image uh, of him stays, across the globe, and to sort of shift that and transform that takes, some serious um, action and work on his part, and honestly some sacrifices as well. So he wanted to go about, turn that around, and not let the previous image that he has had um, really pigeonhole him. So for you, as a potential PMO leader or a first time PMO leader, what does this mean for you? Now, can anybody mention to me, like, what do you guys think this means for you? If you can maybe provide something in the chat, I'd love to see if you guys have any thoughts on this. What does this mean for you when I think of pigeonholing uh, as a PMO leader, or as even as a PMO? What does this mean for you? Any thoughts? Okay, don't think anybody is typing anything there, so let me just go ahead and get into it. Well, yes, so Jennifer mentioned always provided similar opportunities without growth. Yes, and honestly, there's a lot of cookie cutter aspect to it where a lot of people feel that your PMO really needs to be, a procedure cop, a process cop, just create some tools and templates, just get focused on the project management side of things. And that's, and honestly, we're looking at, okay, which are the industry best practices that are working, what model will fit within my organization. And the truth is, there is no model that really needs to can really fit within your organization, because your organization and may have completely different needs than what anybody else in the market has, and therefore the PMO that you should create should meet those needs, and not just those needs, but also get molded based on the culture and the pace, and the ability to accept change within the organization. And based on all of this, the assets and attributes uh, that are required from the PMO leader will also differ, right? And that is where you can shatter the mold, break the cookie cutters, and don't let anyone pigeonhole you, right? And I think this is something that might be very interesting to a lot of you guys here, because most of you really want to become a PMO leader, and some of you guys have already started on that journey. I want to say that, when I look at the journey of a PMO role, I think of that journey and break it up into two distinct categories. One is the conventional journey, and one is the non-conventional journey. So the conventional journey that you see on the screen right now, it's mostly associated or attributed towards a very technical, IT focused a journey where you were either a coder or a tester, or a PMO analyst before, and then you became a project manager, and then you became a PMO leader, or you might be like a consultant, and then a program manager, and then a portfolio manager, and a PMO leader. There are many permutations and combinations here, and then I haven't even mentioned other technical roles like software architect or database administrator or whatever have you. But this is essentially seen as someone who would essentially transcend the role, especially going through that middle tier of either being a project manager, etc., and then eventually becoming a PMO leader. That is what is essentially a lot of people see themselves as becoming, becoming a PMO leader. And then the non-conventional journey, which is what you see here, is someone within operations could directly jump in and become a PMO leader, or someone from operations could become a strategic manager, or even a project manager, and then become a PMO leader. And someone who could even say, what, I just want to create a PMO and start building a PMO within the organization based on the nature and the need and the culture of the organization. And I've had clients, people who have worked with me, who've fit in one of these categories. If I had someone from Australia who was a business analyst in a small organization and really was fed up with the way the projects were being managed, So he just took it upon himself to go ahead and set up a PMO and started slowly building, um, the getting the buy-in from the stakeholders in what's going on, and then eventually he set up the PMO successfully, and um, he was promoted to the head of customer success for that organization, which was a massive transformation for his career. I know someone who had no project management experience based in the Middle East, and they wanted to go ahead and they had a lot of they had some strategy consulting background, and they were pegged within their rapidly growing startup to go about setting up a PMO, and they pegged me to see how I can potentially help them, right? And so that's one thing that I wanted to also mention to Kevin, that you were a direction of operations. Can be a direct line of sight for you to become a PMO leader, because you have a great understanding of how things work within the organization. You probably have the reputation and credibility built within the organization to see how things are going. You know how things work. You know what doesn't work. And so taking on the PMO leader role should definitely be something within a good reaching range for you. So when you look at these two journeys, right, there are many ways to get to the PMO leadership role, and there's no way that there is any sort of cookie cutter stuff associated with this, and therefore you should never let people pigeonhole you. You should challenge the status quo, and don't take people's word for it. And even when people are setting up a PMO, a lot of PMO leaders go about asking just the key people within the organization, or just the PMO sponsor or executive leadership as to what they want in a PMO, and they go about making, setting up a PMO accordingly. Well, why? Because you should be looking at things holistically. You shouldn't just be looking at, okay, this is what you were told and that's what you should be doing. You should be looking at things from top down and bottoms up to make sure that you create a PMO that fits like a glove for your organization, right? And that becomes even more challenging when a PMO was there in the past within your organization, and it failed, and now you have to revive it, and so now you have to also battle perceptions. So you're battling internal perceptions, you're battling external perceptions of PMO being slow, PMO being very bureaucratic and red tape. All those things can totally vanish when you start showing real value, right? So that's something that you should really be focusing on as a first time or an aspiring or even an existing PMO leader. Moving on to the second lesson that we can learn from Matthew McConaughey: find the passion in your work, right? So it became very apparent to Matthew that based on all those repeated same and same similar rom-com type roles that he was getting, he became very, very faded, and he really wanted to find the real meaning to his work. And he was largely driven to pursue very, very meaty and juicy roles, and he took some he definitely took some hit, right? There was a bit of a gap in his career where there were a few years where no movies came out, and that's because he was being offered similar roles, and the movies that he really wanted to go towards, um, they weren't being offered to him. And I think the first one that came out, I think that was a bit of a juicy role for him, was the Lincoln Lawyer movie, and I think prior to that his other movie came out, like maybe a few years ago, and so that is sort of the sacrifice that he gave, and I'm sure there were a lot of mental battles that he had to fight with himself, and probably thinking to himself, I'm this like you know established actor, yet I am struggling to find the kind of work that I want. And I mean, if you think of Hollywood or any movie industry, it's like a small bubble, just like within an organization, right? Yeah, everyone knows everyone, and you have to sort of it takes a bit of a shot to go about making those changes happen, and that took time for him. Um, and so for you as a PMO leader, what is it that you should how would you associate with something like this, right? So let me go ahead and tell you the example of a someone I work with. They were part of a European telecom company where they were brought on to set up a PMO, and it got shut down, and or rather, they were asked to go about starting from scratch for setting up the PMO twice within 12 months. And so, when you go get through that, that just really, kills the passion and the drive that you have for the kind of work that you're doing. And so, when you go about uh, figuring out what is it that you can do for your PMO, always think about what more can my PMO do to add value? How can I retain the PMO and keep it fresh? How do I, continuously go about demonstrating my value as well as a PMO leader and the value of my PMO to the rest of the organization? And one of the things that I really encourage everyone to do is when you're thinking of setting up or a PMO and casting your net in terms of your sphere of influence, go deep first and then go wide, because once you penetrate deep within a certain function or certain geography or a certain department within an organization, what they have seen and felt will be heard by the rest of the organization, and they'll be able to go about, opening you, embracing you with open arms, and seeing what you can do to benefit them. The last lesson from Matthew McConaughey that we can take on as a PMO leader is, don't become complacent. Challenge yourself to be a better you, right? So like I said, Matthew could have, settled in for, the money and lifestyle that he was getting, but he challenged himself. He put himself out there. He definitely took a risk, right? Because even if he got, these UCM media roles, would the audiences appreciate it? Would he be able to meet up to those standards or not? And that required him to get out of his comfort zone and really make it happen. Then if you really, if you, I don't know if any of you in the audience has actually heard his Oscar acceptance speech, but in his speech he mentioned that his hero was himself in 10 years from now in perpetuity. So for instance, today his hero is himself. 10 years from now, once he got, and 10 years from now, his hero would be himself again, an additional 10 years from now. So he sort of gave himself that target that over a decade he would continuously improve himself, and not just improve himself, transform himself to the level, take himself to an to hold himself on that pedestal where he can actually see himself being his hero. So continuous improvement and self development is what this really shines through for all of us. And so let me, ask you guys, if you're aspiring to be a PMO leader, what are you doing to get there? If you're already a PMO leader, what are you doing to get better? And, like a great PMO, that evolves with time, you as a PMO leader must evolve with time. In fact, if you don't, that will impact your PMO as a whole and your team, because when you do well within your organization as a PMO, people will expect more from your PMO, and that means that you need to go about, retooling and upskilling not only your team but yourself to be able to meet those expectations, right? So, you know, I want to focus, the next piece of our webinar on, what does it take to become, not just a PMO leader, but what does it take to become a great PMO leader? And then when I look at the attributes of a PMO leader, I like to sort of think about what I call the O framework, right? Now, within this framework, there are three core facets. There's the skill set, which is on the right hand side of the O, the mindset, which is on the left hand side, and then the circle of the O is your entire experience. And I want to go about taking a bit of a deeper dive in what I mean by skill set, mindset, and experience, and so what really comprises the O framework. So if I look at the skill set first, I want to break the skill set into four distinct categories that are important to have as a PMO leader. And you don't necessarily need to have all of these at all maximum capability points. It depends on where you are, it depends on where your PMO is, it depends on where your organization is, and a mixture of all of these will essentially, help you figure out what are the things that you should really be focusing on in terms of developing as a PMO leader, where things you're behind, and you should be focusing on those right now. So if I look at project management skills, those are things like anything that's associated with managing a project, whether it's managing the schedule, managing the reporting, managing the deliverables and scopes, and the budget. All those assets are attributes are your project management skills. The organizational skills are things like being analytical, understanding the regulatory landscape, understanding what the strategic roadmap for an organization is, what it really takes to align to things strategically. How does annual budgeting and business planning take place? Those are things that are associated to organizational skill sets. Then you have the functional skill sets, which is, if and this really applies to PMOs that are very, heavily focused on, specific departments. So you could have an IT PMO, or you could have an HR PMO, you could have a marketing PMO. And so, if you do have, or if you're working in or leading a department focused PMO, it's important that you have some skill sets or some experience in that specific department. So, if you understand, if you have a technical or an IT background when you're working in an IT PMO, that's definitely going to help you if you've had a marketing background and understand, some of the core processes, some of the good tools, the some of the things that work well within the industry, that could help you, be a part of or lead a functional marketing PMO, right? And then finally, the people skill set, right? Now that is paramount in my opinion. The ability to manage stakeholders, the ability to build relationships, the ability to collaborate and negotiate and influence stakeholders. That is essentially what will make or break you as a PMO leader. That was essentially what will make or break the PMO, right? So that is what I really mean by skill sets, focusing on these four different types and categories of skill sets. When I look at mindset, I think of this in two different categories, leadership and attitude. So, as a leader, you've got to be accountable. You've got to be able to hold people accountable, hold yourself accountable, be able to prioritize things, have a vision, things of that nature. And from an attitude perspective, the ability to just, you know, get things done, being assertive or being patient when needs to be, be focusing on results, being flexible, and ability um, to not only believe in your PMO but also convey and uh, perpetuate that belief in others as well. That comes from an attitude, and that attitude can permeate very very easily within an organization if you stand ground on that. And then finally, experience, right? And I just, everybody knows what experience is, and it's really about, how many PMOs you've set up before, and this is not the same as how much project management experience you've had before, because setting up a PMO is like setting up a business department, or a function, and it's, yes, there are lots of things that can, um, I would say, translate over from the project management side of the world to setting up a PMO. But just saying that I have 15 years of project management experience, so I can be a fantastic PMO leader, is there's a bit of a fallacy in that, right? But from an experience perspective, one thing that I just really like to say is, I love this quote from Rita Mae Brown: "Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment." Right? So you have to go through that path. You have to, walk through that process to see what you've learned, to harden yourself a bit, and to make sure that you're ready for that next opportunity. Now, obviously this is a lot going on here. So how do you make sense of all of this, right? And what I wanted to see is, you might even ask me, Hussein, why are these attributes even important? Why am I looking at these attributes? And this is definitely a good, you know, good set to work with. It's definitely not comprehensive. I'm sure there are many attributes that you're thinking out there that could be there, but my hunch would be that most of those attributes that you're thinking of that are not in this list would at least fit into one of those categories, right? So the reason why I focused a lot on these specific attributes is because they fall right in line with where things will be when you're actually setting up and establishing and evolving a PMO. And if I'm looking at the four key phases of setting up a PMO, the first phase is we're assessing the current state of the organization, current state of the PMO, see what the challenges your organization is facing and what really needs to be done. Your second phase is establishing the target setting and defining the roadmap, which is essentially figuring out, what the future state for the PMO will look like. How will that map to its roles and responsibilities when it gets implemented and rolled out? How does that look over a period of time? That's what phase two is all about. Phase three is really rolling up your sleeves and starting to implement things, and phase four, which would continuously happen, is just improving yourself, improving your team, improving your PMOs, going deeper, going wider, and seeing what more your PMO can do. And so, you will find that a lot of these attributes that we mentioned earlier sort of fall into play, they come into action when you are looking at each phase of the PMO setup and evolution, right? So just to give you an example, uh, uh, you know, eh, for from an assessing maturity perspective, if you look at the skill set attributes, you'll see that, you know, when you're assessing maturity, what does that really mean? It means that you really need to focus on uh, understanding who your stakeholders are. It needs you need to understand what kind of questions you should be asking them to really understand their challenges. You need to have an analytical a mindset. You have to create and schedule interviews with them. You have to start building relationships, because this is an opportunity for you to really make sure that you are setting yourself as and positioning yourself as a PMO leader for your organization. And so when you meet with these people, your stakeholders, it's an opportunity for you to really demonstrate to them that you're very serious about building a PMO that is helpful to them, that PMO is existing just because they have needs, and it's there to just solve their problems. So developing that relationship building from people's side is so important. And then the 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 fact that you're passionate about it, you have a vision for the PMO, and you know where you're heading towards. That mindset comes at play as well. And if you have that belief that yes, the PMO is there to help them, that is going to permeate within your stakeholders as well. And then if you have prior experience, that can absolutely help you speed up things, and help you deliver some quick wins, and establish credibility within your key stakeholders. And then if you move on to the second phase, establishing the target state and defining the roadmap, again, your business planning and analytical skills are definitely at play, but so are your, reporting skills, and absolutely your communication and collaboration skills, because here, you've taken a lot of information in, and now you're sharing it with the rest of the organization that, hey, I spoke to, these people, and this is what I've heard. What do you think? So there's a bit of collaboration. There'll be some feedback. Um, you may have to facilitate some discussions, but you also have to put in the fact that you have to be aware of what's at play. In some situations, some stakeholders that you interviewed might, take a back seat or take a step back from, or change their positions on what they actually shared with you, and therefore you have to not only demonstrate some sort of accountability there, but also assertiveness. That hey guys, this is what I heard. Why is there a reason that we are making these changes, right? So understanding that and sort of treading that line is extremely important, as well. And then obviously the ability to prioritize, that comes at full swing here, because a lot of people may be sharing a lot of different challenges with you, but there might be some that might resonate well, and that the prioritization schemes could differ based on, again, the situation at hand. But that mindset really needs to kick in for you as a PMO leader. Phase three, prioritizing and implementing. So, this is really, like I mentioned earlier, rolling up your sleeves and getting down to it. So setting up a PMO here is really a project in itself. And so all your project management skills are at play, but then also, all your the same skills that you attributed in the first two phases, those those relationship building and communication skills will be important. You will be, as you're rolling out the PMO, conducting some road shows. So, you want to make sure that the people who you're doing the road shows with, they understand what's going on. You're presenting your case well. You're talking about, the journey that you took to get to the PMO at this point, and what does the future look like for them. Help them, believe, that the PMO is going to be there to help them, and also sort of get them into confidence that now they need to start, working through the changes that will come place. So, you will also become that change manager, if you will, and make these shifts happen in people's lives, whether in terms of how they're receiving information, delivering information, doing the work, making, a change in the reporting structure, all of that, or some of it will get changed for people, and you um, how you navigate that path, is critical, and these attributes can help you there. And then finally, phase four, striving for continuous improvement is important and necessary, because if you don't do this, your PMO will fade away over a period of time. You need to be, to refresh the value and continuously market your PMO's success. Nobody else will do that for you. You as a PMO leader, think of it as one of your job descriptions. You need to continuously do that. And so, again, continuously communicating, collaborating, presenting, those are things that will essentially help you, and the credibility that you've established so far, you know, uh, building on that to other areas within the organization, that is something that you really need to be focusing on, and always being curious about what else you can do to help the organization. And even if it's beyond project management perspective, that's something that you should be always thinking about. So, the million-dollar question, how do you acquire these attributes, right? You really don't want to just leave it to chance. You don't really Matthew didn't, certainly. He didn't just wait there and, sit there and say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to accept any of these roles. I'm just going to wait for the right role to come in, then I'm going to accept. He went out, he fought for it. He made the moves to make this transformation happen. So for you, what will your strategy be as a PMO leader, as a aspiring or a first-time PMO leader or PMO leader who's even seasoned? And it's really about taking control, taking the matter in your own hands. And so, what can you do to really make this happen, right? So you need to have, like what Matthew did initially. You also need to do a bit of an introspection and see where you currently are on a scale of all of these things, right? And that means you need to take a look at your previous experiences. You need to think about where you want to be, and then understand where the gaps are, and then once you understand what the gaps are, prioritize them as well, right? So the screenshots that you see on the screen, it's from my attributes introspection guide, and along with the deck, you will get a copy of the attributes introspection guide as well, which you could use, and start making some of these changes to yourselves to develop the PMO attributes, PMO leadership attributes that you would like. And this sheet essentially has all the attributes that we have listed in the deck, categorized based on what you've seen in this presentation, and it's really a very subjective measure. There's no right or wrong. It's on a scale of 1 to 5. Five being the best, one being the worst, or zero, or maybe it starts with 0. I'm not sure, or I don't remember. Sorry, but essentially that is something that you just want to take, and then you can your aspirations towards them could be completely arbitrary as well. I mean, the point is you just want to take stock and move towards this. So this is more of a treading between art and science versus just making it extremely scientific. The other thing that I want to mention is that then in terms of prioritization, it doesn't necessarily mean that you go with the highest gaps. It could be what you really want to do individually, right? So for instance, um, if I take negotiation, for example, and my current attribute is five is one, and I really want to be a four. My gap there is three, and then if I look at communication, my current attribute is three, and my ideal state is four. My gap there is one, but I may choose to focus more on communication now because I feel that where I am today or where I want to be immediately, I really want to focus on my communication skills first and maybe take actions on doing some of those accordingly, right? So that's something that you can do for yourself, and then you can take a look at this sort of a chart there as well, which is there within the introspection guide, and you can cover these gaps. How once you understand what the gaps are, how do you cover them, right? How do you develop yourself to improve your attribute levels to where you essentially want them to be, right? So you could go about finding the right roles for you that help and force you and empower you to exercise those attributes more, or you can find mentors or coaches who can help you with some in development of these specific attributes. You can find classes or read books and blogs and other publications, and based on the roles, making a conscious effort in practicing and exercising these attributes. These are some of the things that you can do to really move the needle from your side. And some of the suggestions in terms of books, I just listed something out there. You'll have some of these as well when you get the deck. And then I don't want to go about listing a lot of blogs and online collaboration because there's tons out there, and I'm sure a simple Google search can help you. There is also opportunities for online learnings, and I've just shamelessly plugged my own LinkedIn learning course here, as well as my own, PMO course on Udemy as well. You can take a look at that, but then there are other platforms like Coursera that's out there. There's things like Toastmasters, and I'm sure a lot of other organizations and platforms that you can use to develop the skills that you need and want, right? And in terms of coaching, there's again, if we're looking at specifically around PMOs, coaching around PMOs, you could simply do a Google search and find some of the options that you have available out there. That's something that Purvas Consulting, my company, also offers as well. And then, just want to go ahead and close off saying that, Matthew made it a point to, make things happen. He didn't sit around. He took things into, his own hands. And I know that a lot of you guys here are motivated enough to take out time to come and to learn more about how you can make things happen. A lot of you guys want to become PMO leaders, and you want to develop yourself into how you want to become a PMO leader one day. And there's there's obviously some of the technical attributes versus where how do you actually set up a PMO versus what should my resume look like versus okay, am I really strong in some of these negotiation communication skills? Do I, you know, can I create a very solid vision and communicate it effectively about my PMO to the rest of the organization? Can I communicate, up the chain, down the chain, across uh, and across my all my peers to make sure that we're all on the same page. Some of those things that you're probably feeling, some of these things you're feeling within that, yes, you might need some development there, or you may be like, some of these things I'm really strong in, but I really want to work on some of those other things. These are things, these are areas that you can work upon. This is a strategy that I've outlined for you. Now the action is for yours to take, and I know you've got this. And I want to go ahead and thank you for taking the time to be here. And I'll go ahead and open up to any questions that you might have. I also want to share that in this at the bottom of this slide, you can see the email there. My email address there. So if anybody even wants to complete their attributes introspection guide and wants to share that with me and wants to maybe jump on a 15-minute call, to have a quick chat about it, I'm more than happy to. Just go ahead and send me an email with your completed attributes introspection guide, and I can help you with all of that. Just a quick reminder, you will receive this recording, the slide deck, as well as the attributes introspection guide in 2 business days. And that's it from me. So thank you again for your participation, and I will open it up to any questions that you guys might have right now. Again, all questions need to be typed in to the chat. So if you could please go ahead and do that, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Awesome presentation. Thank you for that, Kevin. I appreciate that. Thank you, Elwood. I appreciate that. Thank you for the comment. You mentioned it was great information. Thank you. Ramesh's question is, what are the challenges to set up a business-oriented PMO? Ramesh, no matter what your PMO is, whether it's a business-oriented PMO, whether it's an IT PMO, whether it's an organizational PMO, whether it's an EPMO, the challenges are the same. The biggest challenge that you see for setting up a PMO is getting executive buy-in, right? And major stakeholder buy-in. And what happens is that essentially, PMOs get into this position where, they just come in, they try to go about setting up some standards and templates and tools and start shoving those templates and tools and processes within the rest of the organization when nobody wants it, or it doesn't go as planned, or people work on it for a bit and then let it go. uh, you know uh, the PMO sort of starts falling into shambles, and the stakeholders themselves are become disoriented. Now when that happens, and executives who were promised, things like, consistent delivery, better visibility into resources, improving, resource productivity and efficiency, long-term cost savings. When that doesn't get translated into the PMO, doesn't get translated into any of these, the executives start falling and out of place, and they start losing faith in the PMO as well. So no matter what type of PMO it is, getting executive buy-in and stakeholder buy-in is the biggest challenge to setting up a PMO. Uh, Thanks so much, Carol. Appreciate the fact that you enjoyed this. Gabriel asks, please, what level of certification is required for one to be a PMO leader? Gabriel, one thing that I mentioned throughout this presentation, even before we started, you don't need a certification to be a PMO leader. Some of the people who, some experts who might who might be out there might ask you to, be CMMI, certified, or be change management certified, be have some sort of PROCE certification, and then PMP certified, and things of that nature. Like I mentioned, there are many paths to become a PMO leader. I talked about that extensively during our presentation. What to me is the biggest factor in the success of a PMO leader is the relationships and credibility built within the organization, and or the ability to quickly develop relationships and credibility within the organization. Now, having said that, certifications can certainly be helpful to just get a job, because that's just how the world works, unfortunately. And so, you know, uh, uh, I would say that, in that perspective, having um, at least a PMP would, some people would think of it as a minimum qualifier. I personally don't, but to be, being able to build those relationships, being able to know how to develop the PMO, what that life cycle looks like, as well as the ability to manage change. If you have these 3 things, in my opinion, you don't really need any other certification. Um, okay, Kevin, I'm glad that the assessment will help most of your questions. Marcelo asks, you said that someone could become a PMO leader by creating a PMO, but how to stay one? Marcelo, I'm not sure I understand that. If you could maybe rephrase that, that would be helpful. Um, Trish asks, thank you, Hussein, helpful presentation insights. I'm just at a div learning. Okay, so Trish, welcome to the journey about learning project management formally. That's perfect. Um, Ramesh asks, what is the mindset change needed? What do you mean by that, Ramesh? Do you mean a mindset change for a, someone to become a PMO leader? Mindset change to mindset to enable mindset change to for the executives and stakeholders to buy into the PMO? I'm not sure what you mean. If you could perhaps clarify that, I can more than happy to answer the questions for you. Lucine asks, doesn't experience and credibility play a big role with certification? Absolutely, and that's something that I mentioned when answering the questions about Lucine. You sort of nailed it and put it very succinctly. Yes, experience will help you and teach you lessons that no certifications ever will, and having credibility just enables things to happen really quickly. Like one thing that one of your famous, leadership gurus, John C. Maxwell, says that, before you are able to, get people to buy in into your ideas, you need people to, buy in into you. That means you have to set up and build the credibility, whether that is by, showing that you're a friendly person, showing that you know your things, showing that, you aren't just, all talk, no action. You're backing up what you're saying. You commit to something, you do it. There could be, multiple things involved in building that credibility, but that essentially plays a massive role. And I would say that definitely trumps any sort of certifications. Kevin is asking, is there a good resource for creating appropriate templates? What kind of templates are you looking at, Kevin? Um, is it project management templates? Is it reporting templates? If you could maybe clarify on that. But just to let you know, there's a time saver deck that I have that I can a formal setup to support PM objectives. Yes, shamelessly plugging my course, my workshops. That's definitely the kind of templates that I have created and which I teach in my workshop, that I teach in my courses, that I provide in my coaching and PMO leadership support are the entire the frameworks, life cycles, methodologies, and tools that you need to set up a PMO from scratch. If you just want to get a sense of what some of those look like, you can go ahead and on my website, www.parvazcc.com. It's on the slide right there as well. Go on the blog side and search for setting up a PMO. There's a 2,000 word blog or so that talks about all of that, but essentially my courses and all of that talk more about it. Happy to also answer any for questions if you shoot me an email, Kevin. Uh, all right, Gabriel, I'm glad to be able to answer your questions. And Ramesh is asking to enable stakeholders for adoption. So, Ramesh, I think here when you look at what's really needed for the mindset change, it when you think of any sort of change management piece, you have to focus on the areas that the stakeholders need to be continuously engaged throughout the process of change, right? You can't just make a change happen or get everything ready for change and then let your stakeholders know, by the way, change is coming. Here's a 2-day training, get ready. What you really need to understand is that you have to inform them that the change is coming. You have to involve them in that change. And when that's when I talked about in the first phase of setting up the PMO, when you're assessing the maturity, you ask the stakeholders what their needs are, because when you position it that way, they will believe that you are creating the PMO for them versus creating a PMO and just telling them what to do, right? And then even in the second phase of setting up the PMO, when you share those findings with the rest of your stakeholders, you're again involving them to, double check, provide feedback, etc. Then when you come down to the implementation phase, you're sort of hand holding them through the process as you roll it out, developing roadshows to see, to tell them about that entire journey and what the future looks like for them. That entire rollout also includes things like cheat sheets and guides and incentives that will, sort of encourage more stakeholder engagement. And so these are all elements that are important for you to exercise as you're about to roll out the PMO, right? And that's where the change adoption happens. I hope that answers your question, Ramesh. All right, guys. Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. I look forward to hearing from you as well. Um, we have 1 more minute, guys. So I'll take on any last question if you have it. All right, I think everybody is good to go. So thank you again, everyone, for being a part of our presentation today. I hope you found it to be helpful and of value. Like I mentioned earlier, you will get the recording, the deck, as well as the attribute inspection guide in 2 business days. All the information that you need, either to get in touch with me or GreyCampus, is right there on the screen. Thank you very much again for joining. Take care and talk soon. Bye bye.